Hello friends, on the special lecture where we have talked about. In the first lecture we talked about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So continuing from what we have done in part 1, where we tried to understand Jallianwala Bagh to place it in the larger history of modern India, and thereafter the kinds of arguments which have been given by different scholars to see and analyze the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and the way the British, they unleashed the kind of reign of terror over the Indians in that framework, that how so many defenseless Indians, they were being killed by the British in the Jallianwala Bagh disaster or tragedy. And it was an intended and completely intentional kind of decision which was taken by General Dyer, and the way he was being sent by Michael O'Dwyer, who was the Lieutenant Governor of Punjab at that point of time. And this issue has to be seen in the larger framework of the Rowlatt Act, and how we find that because of the Rowlatt Act, the government was trying to take that kind of an authority where any kind of an arrest or search of any Indian without warrant, or to confine the suspects without trial for renewable periods of up to a year. So to understand Rowlatt Act simply is that no appeal, no vakil and no dalil. So that was the kind of a background to the Rowlatt Act, that the emergency kinds of provisions which were there during the war times, they were to be in a way imposed during the peace times as well. And the people, those who were associated with the national movement, and they felt that any kind of a civil liberty which was with the Indians, that was being taken away, and Gandhi called it as some sort of a national wrong, and he felt that this kind of a check on the civil liberty of the people should not be done by the British. And Gandhi felt that all sections of the society, they should in a way come and join in the movement, and he intended to seek the support of all the sections of the society. And all the sections of the society will only participate in the movement when they will realize that British, they were trying to throttle their aspirations in some way. And Satyagrahas Sabha, it was formed in Ahmedabad, and thereafter it was formed in other parts of India, and these Satyagrahas Sabhas, they were carrying some kind of an active campaign against the Rowlatt agitation, and Gandhi himself, he travelled to mobilize the public opinion. So we find that all these kinds of activities, they were being done during this point of time. And how at this point of time we find that in Punjab especially, we find that the protest against the Rowlatt legislation, it began much before Gandhi had formally decided to launch an agitation. And both the English as well as the vernacular press in Punjab, it published numerous articles and editorials criticizing Rowlatt bills and appealed to government to withdraw it. So that was the kind of background which was there at here, and we find that during this period a number of meetings, they were being organized during this time, and there was a lot of focus in these meetings on the communal unity or communal harmony, and slogans like Hindu Muslim ki Jai, they were being raised many times in these kinds of gatherings which were happening in these regions. And K.L. Tuteja, he has argued that people in Punjab, they were comparatively more prepared even before Gandhi came. Because Gandhi could not visit Punjab at that point of time, or even during the Rowlatt agitation, but the people, they were prepared. This is what K.L. Tuteja argues. And he also suggests that the activities of Satyagrahas Sabha, they were limited in this part, in this province, as not more than a dozen people, they signed the Satyagraha pledge. So the kind of background which Punjab had, and so people, they were aware, and Gandhi was not enjoying that kind of a power here. This has been talked about, but when we tend to understand that Gandhi's appeal, it was there not only in one region, but it was there everywhere, and even in Punjab, the way Gandhi was being perceived. And scholars, they also talked about the role of rumors. Ranjit Guha has talked about the way Gandhi was seen because of the kind of rumors which were there, and Gandhi's charisma and strength, that was also being felt by the masses at different levels. And Gandhi was seen as some sort of a savior or a messiah for the common masses, and which indeed deeply influenced the movement which was led by him. So we find that it might be one argument that Gandhi was not able to visit Punjab at that point of time, but even then Gandhi was so popular, and Sumit Sarkar has also seen it from this perspective, that how Gandhi was particularly seen at that point of time, and Gandhi was seen as some sort of a deity during this period, and at different assemblies how Gandhi ji ki jai, that was the kind of idea which was being discussed in the different rallies, and slogans they were being given, and he was seen as some sort of a rishi or wali or Muhammad or Krishna. All these kinds of religious imagery was also associated with Gandhi at that point of time. And we find that how in different cities Gandhi was being perceived, and Gandhi's popularity, it rose, and British, they were trying to negate the kind of importance which Gandhi and other political leaders they had. And the secretary to the government of India, he saw that it was a direct defiance and challenge to its authority, the way these kind of meetings, and especially Jallianwala Bagh meeting was held. So what we find that British, they were in a way in the syndrome of repression, how they wanted to repress Indians, and any kind of a communal unity was belittled by them. And even Hunter Commission, which was established after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, it reported that this was purely a temporary phenomena. Hindu-Muslim unity, he was referred to this way, and efforts towards unity had been made largely indeed in political interest to oppose the British government, and had no long lasting significance, being a purely expedient move. So British, they wanted to underplay the unity of the Hindus and the Muslims, because they were also afraid that the way things unfolded in the revolt of 1857, so they were trying to downplay these kinds of things which happened during this point of time. And as I told you that how the racial attitude of the British, how the violent activities in which they engaged themselves to suppress the Indians, that was that could be seen during this point of time. And how Jallianwala Bagh Memorial, when it was being built, how people, they were able to collect nearly 8 lakh of rupees during this point of time, and how it was trying to show that the way supreme sacrifice was being made by the masses at that point of time. So we find that how the sentiments of the people, they could be aroused, and in the popular memory we find that in different dramas, nationalist songs, novels, popular arts, we find that how British, they were being shown and reflected, and the civilizational claims of the colonial masters, they were being in a way rejected. And some of the films like Jallianwala Bagh, the way they tried to project the Jallianwala Bagh on the screen. And we also find that how the experiences of the people with regard to the colonial authority, they were trying to project that this kind of an anti-colonial struggle was one thing in which they had to engage. And some of the films, they in a way tried to project the patriotic fervor of those times, how revolutionaries they sacrificed themselves during this period. And British, they were barbaric in nature, their attitude was such, they were hypocrites, and the hypocritic character of the British masses, those who tried to support General Dyer, the way £30,000 they were being collected with the assistance of the Morning Post, and this money was collected for General Dyer, who had ordered to kill the peaceful and the unarmed masses. So that was the kind of psychology, that was the kind of activity in which British they indulged themselves. And the scholars, those who argued that British people or British masses, they were innocent, they were not even aware the kind of terror which was perpetrated by the colonial rulers in India. But this kind of an incident, it clearly showed that they were aware that the way Indians they were being treated and they were being killed, and despite this fact they were able to collect so much money for a murderer or butcher.
जलियांवाला बाग ये देखो यहीं चली थी गोलियां, ये मत पूछो किसने खेली यहाँ खून की होलियां.
So in the film clip which was shown to you, where the reference to Jallianwala Bagh massacre is being made, and this film was made in 1950s, I think 1954 to be more precise, Jagriti, and it was a very popular film. And even now when you see such kind of portrayals, you realize that this kind of a popular this kind of an imagery is there in popular culture. It was there in 1954, the way it was being shown, and as late as 2017 there is a film called Filori, where again the reference to Jallianwala Bagh is made, how it was connected to the Jallianwala Bagh, and even Vicky Kaushal is being cast in an upcoming film which is on Udham Singh. So films, they try to communicate, they try to give you the kind of things which are happening in the society at that point of time. And in 1977 another film was made with the title of Jallianwala Bagh, as you can see on the screen, that how in this film, in which you have Vinod Khanna and Om Shivpuri. Om Shivpuri is the father of Vinod Khanna in the film, and Vinod Khanna is shown as some sort of a person who believes in violence, and Om Shivpuri believes in non-violence. How the role of women in this film, where support is being provided by Deepti Naval and Shabana Azmi, they are also committed to the cause of freedom, and Hindu-Muslim unity which was displayed before and after Jallianwala Bagh massacre could also be seen in this particular film. So we find that the idea of Jallianwala Bagh, the ideas which were associated with the national movement, how they got reflected in the various films during this time, and how the soldiers, those who fought in the First World War, they were also being forgotten during by the British. Their contribution was not even realized by the British at that point of time. Another popular film was Gandhi, which was made in 1982, and it depicted the brutality of the Jallianwala Bagh carnage in one of the sequences, and it projects Gandhian nationalism which was based on non-violence and truth. So we find that films, they are trying to convey the ideals of the national movement, they were trying to convey the principles on which the national movement leaders they stood for. And in one of the sequences, the brutality of the Jallianwala Bagh carnage is shown in the film, and the film is trying to give this kind of an idea that how British whatever approach they took to suppress the Indians, but the national movement could not be suppressed by them if we try to understand in the larger framework.
You want to go to jail, you will walk out, because 100,000 Englishmen simply cannot control 350 million Indians if those Indians refuse to cooperate.
So in this film clip which you saw, which was talking about the non-violent principles on which Gandhi believed, and Gandhi always felt that these kinds of non-violent principles on which one has to fight against the British, because Gandhi believed in Satya and Ahimsa, and he did not want, as I told you earlier as well, that Gandhi did not seek any kind of a revenge. He was not in this kind of a mood where revenge from General Dyer should be sought in any way, but he wanted to change the system. He argued that the system which produced people like General Dyer, it should be replaced with a better system where you do not have people who have these kinds of ideas of killing people, innocent people so mercilessly. So that was the kind of idea this particular film talks about, and it was a blockbuster film which was shot with an international cast in India largely, and it was able to create that kind of an impact on the society as well. The other films like Shaheed Udham Singh, which was made in 2000, and it depicts the background of the massacre and how the revenge is being taken by Shaheed Udham Singh, who killed the then Punjab Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer in London on March 13, 1940. So what we find that how 1857 revolt and the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, they were being seen or compared by the historians, and at the same time after the event of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, we find that this lingers on, and Shaheed Udham Singh, who felt that it was some kind of a personal loss at that point of time, and he believed that his objective was to kill the people, those who were associated with the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and he makes it his lifelong mission, and he is then able to kill the Lieutenant Governor of Punjab of that time, Michael O'Dwyer, in London. So that is the way the revolutionaries, those who were in a way witness, or those who read about the Jallianwala Bagh, people like Shahid Bhagat Singh, who was also in a way affected by this kind of a tragedy. And we also find that how Udham Singh's connection was there with regard to the Ghadar party, and the references to the divide and rule policy of the British, they were also being made at this point of time. And he names himself as Ram Muhammad Singh Azad, which is a name communicated by Udham Singh, and trying to show his secular credentials. So we find that how with the Ghadar party he was able to have the kind of connections which he had, and the way British, they tried to divide both the Muslims and the Hindus, which was reflected in the kind of communal policy or the development of the communalism, which we find because of the policies which were followed by the British. When you see the film Shaheed Udham Singh, and there is some kind of a dialogue which was going on in the court. So in the speech of Udham Singh in court, he talks about the character of the British rulers and calls them dirty dogs and beasts, trying to portray the imperialist character which was of the British. And he talks about the character of the revolutionaries, which those who were ready to sacrifice himself for the country, they were ready that they will be sacrificed for the country. And he says that I am not ready to die, I am not afraid to die, I am ready to die, and I will be very proud if I die. So dying was not a thing which can be communicated as it is an easy thing, and the people, those who were revolutionaries, they were ready to sacrifice themselves for the country, and they were so young blood.
I am not afraid of death. Remember this. मैं मरांगा ते तुहानू हिंदुस्तान तो पहचान लई होर हजारा हिंदुस्तानी उठ खड़े होंगे. You dirty dogs. I must say here, I have nothing against the English people. मैं अंग्रेज किसाना ते मजदूरां दे खिलाफ नहीं. मेरी मुखालफत अंग्रेजादी साम्राज्यवादी सरकार दे नाले.
So as you saw in the clip, as Udham Singh, he says that he is not against the British people, and he is against the colonial government who is trying to exploit them in every way, and he wanted that these people, they should those who have this kind of an imperialist mindset, they should leave India. And these kinds of ideas you also see in a film called The Legend of Bhagat Singh, which was made in 2002, and there were 2-3 other films which were made on Bhagat Singh during this point of time. And the gruesome mass murder was also shown in this particular film, and how it became some sort of a catalyst in the evolution of the martyrs like Bhagat Singh, Udham Singh, etc. So Jallianwala Bagh massacre gave some kind of a thrust to the national movement, and how
आज बैसाखी का दिन है. हम यहाँ किसी किस्म का फसाद करने के लिए इकट्ठा नहीं हुए हैं. आज की हमारी ये मीटिंग कानून को चैलेंज करने के लिए नहीं, बल्कि सरकार से ये अपील करने के लिए है कि वो अपने कर्फ्यू के फैसले पर फिर से गौर करे और हमारे लीडर साहब.
So as you saw on the screen that how young Bhagat Singh is influenced by the Jallianwala Bagh massacre or that tragedy, and he feels that how as an Indian, and he has to seek some kind of support for his countrymen, the way he could be fighting against the British, that will provide all sorts of strength. So this is what he sees. And there was another film, Rang De Basanti, in which Amir Khan acted, and how the revolutionary freedom fighters, they are being shown, and the film is rooted, as you can see on the screen as well, in the contemporary times, and it talks about the corruption in the public life. So the film is trying to seek answers in the past, where people even sacrifice their lives for the sake of their country, and which was not happening at this point of time, and how the black and white sequences, they are being used to show the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and how the people, those who were the revolutionaries, they wanted to change the system at that point of time. And now in the contemporary times, the young blood, it has to become revolutionary in some way, so that any kind of corruption in public life can be avoided. As you can see on the screen, Rang De Basanti, the clipping. So let's talk about another film called Filori, and which was a ghost story, and it had that kind of a contemporary milieu, and it talks about the backdrop of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, where the story is about the unfulfilled love, as the male protagonist died in the carnage of the Jallianwala Bagh. So what we find in these kinds of images which we see in the various films which have been shown, that films, they are trying to communicate an event, they are trying to present the importance of that event, and over a period of time how that event is being understood among the common masses. So any historical event, especially when we are talking about the Jallianwala Bagh, the way historians, they have tried to understand this particular event, how that event, it roused the spirit of defiance among the people, those who were part of the national movement in the later point of time, and how it was able to inspire so many people that they became part of the national movement. And it also shows the ugly face of the British, that how British, they used the brute force on the unsuspecting masses, and the violence as some sort of a creed of the British. So these kinds of different kinds of arguments with regard to the debates of the historians, and the way the popular culture or the films, they try to project the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, all of them, they are trying to communicate or give some kind of a holistic view about an event. So I'd like to end here. Thank you very much.